Good morning. Welcome to another video. I'm out a bit earlier than normal. And it's can definitely feel it temperature wise. So this video I actually did yesterday on my Wednesday walk, but I wasn't happy with it. I wasn't in the best of moods yesterday, and it sort of came through in the video. It was very aggressive and a bit nazi. So I thought, I'm not uploading that. I can make these points better with a bit more of a calmer head. So I scrapped that and thought I'll do it again today. I did say that I hadn't planned on a video for Wednesday because I was unsure about the weather. Well, the weather was alright. It's actually similar to it is this morning. But rather than put up a video and then regret it, thinking I could have done better and articulated my points better, I'll scrap it and redo it today. Now, yesterday, when I came out, part of the problem was I didn't really know what I was going to talk about, and I kind of started on one track and went on to the other, and sort of went a bit aggressive, I was a bit angry, and I wasn't satisfied that was really reflective of how I feel. And my point that I was trying to make. So today I thought I'll make the same point, but because I've got it planned and I've had time to think about the point that I want to make, I can do a better job of it. So it's kind of a little bit understandable how I did get knocked off a bit, because the theme of the video, or the topic of the video, is to really put the question out there: are gamers treated badly by the games industry? And I think that's an interesting question, because most companies, most industries, they exist to take money off people. That's primarily the point of existing, is part of the circle of money, making a living. It's where it all starts. The problem starts to come in to where it goes too far. And I think at times, it's fair to say, I think the games industry does go too far. Both in the way it handles the monetization of things, how it generates revenue, and then how it treats its customers, how it treats the gamer. I don't think it necessarily treats the gamer very well, and I'll try and get into that a little bit more when I get in the park. I think sometimes it's intentional and sometimes it's unintentional, but when I pick up the video in the park, having done my usual little intro while walking down this this lane, I'll get into it and hopefully articulate it far better than the overly... I thought it was too aggressive, it was too ranty, it was too angry. So I'll call it here and see you in the park. Right, off we go. I was having a bit of a struggle then to get my microphone paired with the camera. I don't know if you can see it at this range, you probably can't, but there's a dude over there doing a job I'd love to do. Sat on a big lawnmower tractor thing. I'd love to do that job. Absolutely love to do it. Anyway, we were talking about, do I think that the games industry gives gamers, treats gamers fairly, treats us well, or does it treat us like rubbish? A gamer's not given a fair crack of the whip. It depends on which way you approach this. I'll say it this way. No, I don't think they do give us a fair crack of the whip, to be perfectly honest. I think that we're not treated particularly well. I think that the games industry itself could and should do a lot better in its relationship with its clients, with its customer base, with gamers. We've seen an awful lot in the past few years of conflict, division, aggressive rhetoric coming from gamers and also coming from video game publishers and hardware manufacturers. There appears to be a complete reticence sometimes to acknowledge that they're doing something that's not exactly in the best interests of us, the gamer. Sometimes they've been actually caught outright lying to the gamer, and when they've been brought to heel over it by gamers, and gamers have pulled them up over it, we've been given a lot of grief. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's fair at all. Gamers can be arseholes. I know that. We all know that. I'm a gamer, so I know. But that shouldn't be the yardstick with which all gamers are judged. On a handful that can be idiotic, a handful that can be annoying. And likewise, not all video game publishers or hardware manufacturers are setting out to be nefarious. There are times that these people do genuinely want to make a really good game, but circumstances overtake them and the game comes out and it's disappointing, or they've dropped features from the game that was promised. But that happens in anything. But there are some times where we are outright lied to. And when these companies do outright lie to us, they should be hauled over the coals for it. I'm not here to defend anyone. I'm here to just simply say what I think and how it should be. So I remember back in the 90s, I'll use this as an example. Console games came on cartridge, which were expensive to produce. Games cartridges, as I slip on a leaf, games cartridges were manufactured, they've got chipboards, the microchips, chipboards, hard plastic, moulded. Each cartridge was specific and reflective of the company that the cartridge was made for. So Nintendo had their own style, Sega had theirs, Microsoft, no they didn't. Electronic Arts had theirs, Microsoft certainly didn't. They didn't have a games console back then. Now, you know, Japanese Mega Drive cartridges were a different shape to the ones that were released in the West. As I said, EA had their own distinctive style of cartridge, which was taller, with a little like yellow tab on them. They were kind of unique. I think Codemasters had, well, they came out with a unique cartridge for Micro Machines, where it had extra joy ports built into the cartridge itself to allow double the amount of players, because the cartridge and the console itself, that only had 2, and they put an additional 2 cartridge ports, 2 controller ports on the cartridge, which enabled it to double the amount of players you could have. Actually, technically, with Micro Machines, you could have 8 players. You could have 2 players sharing a controller, which, believe me, back in the day when that came out when I was like 18, 19, round at my friends, somewhat inebriated, shall we say, on substances that may not have been alcoholic. Playing that game was hilarious. I've got a lot of fun memories trying to play that while sharing a controller with somebody, while not exactly being on planet Earth at the time. But yeah, it was different. It was, each cartridge, each company wanted their own distinctive thing, and that cost money. You know, you have the tooling for the creation of the plastic itself, and then you've got the manufacturing process of microchips. So there was a considerable cost associated with it. A cost that just wasn't there when stuff was just on tape. You know, the stuff that was very standardized on tape back in the 80s, and 3.5-inch floppy disks. They were pretty standard in the 80s, 90s. Even the 5.25-inch, again, they were standard. The standard size to fit a standard size drive. So why am I making this point? Well, when the 90s dawned and CD-ROM technology kicked into play, one of the selling points of this was that it was going to substantially drive down the cost of games. Games were going to be bigger, better, but actually more affordable. They were going to be cheaper. One of the things that was articulated at the time was that the cost of making a CD-ROM was as little as 50 pence. And now that was something that was touted around by the industry. You know, again, as part of, I want to say, propaganda. I didn't really understand why there would ever have been any pushback to CD-ROM technology at the time. You know, it gave you full motion video, increased storage, the ability to stream music directly from the disc onto the device, so you would get proper music, hi-fi quality audio. Now the devices weren't cheap. The Mega CD, for example, wasn't cheap. It came out for the Mega Drive as an add-on. But that all became somewhat of a moot point as the CD technology became cheaper. It's like anything else. When Blu-rays first come out, Blu-ray drives were expensive, same with DVD. I remember paying £300 for my first DVD player. It was a Sony one. It was fantastic. These days you can pick one up for, you know, £30-40. I think the one I've got now, the Panasonic one I've got now, was £50. You know, and that'll play discs from anywhere in the world. You know, it's the same as technology becomes more what's the word I'm looking for? The proliferation of technology and the research and development costs are absorbed in those initial years when it comes out. The price is lower. That's just how it is. And yeah, I absolutely could see at the time and was very much in favour of CD-ROM technology. I did not see the drawbacks, to be honest with you. I think one of the things people were a little concerned, maybe unhappy about, was the additional loading times. But that was about it. And it wasn't that bad. And as drives got faster and processors got faster, the loading times came down quite a bit. The only other thing you had was you had to look after the disc. Discs can get scratched. And so, you know, for kids who love to throw things around, those discs were prone to getting scratched and therefore become unreadable. One of the things I do remember in the buying second-hand games back then was you had to check the disc. PlayStation discs in particular were very prone to scratching. They didn't have the standard sort of silver reflective surface. They were black. And they were quite easy to scratch. But, you know, if you looked after your stuff, there wasn't a problem. I've got games that I've had on PlayStation I've still got now, and they're in immaculate condition. My discs lived in two places, in the console when I was using them, and stored away safely in the case when I wasn't. I could never comprehend why people mistreated their stuff. But anyway, I'm going on one of Adie's tangents that this isn't about the wonders of CD-ROM. So anyway, going back onto the point I'm making, which I think I started about 20 minutes ago, we were promised it would be cheaper. Now initially it did. Game prices on cartridge for some games that had been like $34.99 or $39.99 over here came down in price to about $29.99. And then the inevitable happens. They start creeping up again. Prices start going up to $34.99. And then when we made the jump to PlayStation 2, somehow everything went up in price again to $39.99. It went up by £10 overnight. And of course they justified this by saying, well, the games are more complex now. Development time is longer. You know, the graphics are better. Okay. Is it really £10 per game? No. No, it wasn't. Yeah, the graphics were better, but not that would warrant such a leap forward in the price of a game. Now, when I'm talking about prices of games here, I'm talking about in the UK. I have very limited knowledge of the price of games in the US. Some people, you know, talk to me about how Commodore 64 games, you know, were like $30, $40 in the US. And even if I used a very generous $2 to the pound conversion, that would be still way more than what we were paying here. And I guess it was because it was just a different pricing structure over there. So I can't speak to pricing of stuff in the US. I don't have the basis of experience with not having lived there to understand why stuff was more expensive. I mean, games on floppy disk here on the Commodore 64 would be about £14 to £15. On cassette they would be £9.99. So even if you doubled that, you'd be looking at $20 to $30. I suppose it's not, but that's on, you know, that the more expensive one is on floppy disk, and the games were not released as standard on floppy here. The main release was cassette. So by the time we get to PlayStation 2, we've suddenly got to the realm of games costing as much as they did on cartridge. Within the space of a few years, you know, within like sort of 5 years, this incredible saving we were promised had evaporated with the rather dubious excuse of development time for games and larger teams needed to make these games as being the reason. I say dubious excuse because there was no real way of measuring that. There wasn't, and there never has been. I think if you rely on the credits that roll at the end of a video game these days and point to the vast amount of people that appear to be working on that game, I don't think that necessarily paints an accurate picture of how many people work on the game. They credit everyone, you know, who had even the most cursory role, as it were. They don't necessarily work on the game, but they've worked for a company that, you know, that licensed tools to be used in the game. Because those people haven't worked on it. You know, because you get people that are like, oh, you know, they'll list it as like IT support, and it lists everybody from the IT support company. Well, they didn't work on the game, did they? You know, they were there if somebody's computer went on the fritz, but they didn't work on the game. But it's just a way of saying thank you to everyone. But they say they didn't work on the game, so it's very difficult to actually accurately gauge the people who did work on it. And this is problematic when you're talking about judging people's involvement in the game is the number of people involved in making the game gone up to the extent with which they're trying to make out? What are you doing, dude? You stalking something? You see a squirrel? He was after something. So we were kind of lied to a little bit, I think. I think they took opportunity to hoist those prices back up straight away. They took opportunity to hoist it back up immediately when, they were. So yeah, they used that to justify increasing the price of the games, which I think was really unfair. Going forward into more modern era, for example, digital downloads were mooted as a way with which the price of games would come down really substantially in an attempt to, going forward into the modern age with the price of games, around the 360 PS3 generation, we saw the model of selling full-priced AAA games digitally for the first time on consoles. Now, again, one of the things that they stated at the time was this would make games cheaper and far more affordable because you didn't have to factor in manufacturing costs and costs associated with distribution to bricks and mortar store. So printed instruction manuals, covers, the artwork for those covers, then paying for the discs to be processed and for the discs to be manufactured. All of that was going to go away. The entire distribution network, including, actually delivering to bricks and mortar stores and so on and so forth, all of that was going to go away. And we were going to be left with just the cost of the digital distribution. In other words, the cost of making the game without the additional costs of the manufacturing of the game. And this was done as a way of encouraging people away from physical media. There was a rather ulterior motive to doing this, which was really out of order. And we've seen that come to fruition recently in this generation. Now, I think it was around 2004, Steam launched, and that became a distributor for games on PC. And that essentially wiped out the boxed retail for PC games, which was sad really, because some PC games had great box art, great box design, fantastic instruction manuals. They really put some effort into some of them as collector's items, and that went away very quickly as Steam became the sort of de facto distribution outlet for PCs. Now, with PCs, you were installing the game. That was pretty much, there was a handful that did run off a CD-ROM, but it was never really advisable. The CD-ROM really was only useful for full motion video and for audio. But the games themselves would pretty much always install onto a hard drive. So the culture of installing a game and then, you know, putting everything in the box and tossing it to one side, that culture was pretty much always there. I know, you know, over time those big boxes did become a problem. I remember having quite a few on the PC that I had back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and thinking, where the hell am I going to put all these boxes, because I didn't want to destroy them. And I ended up having to, because I couldn't find the storage for them anymore. I just took the instruction manuals. I took the instruction manuals out and got rid of them. Got rid of the boxes, that is, not the instruction manuals. I've still got them. And it was, so Steam sort of like came along, and then you've got GOG, which was great for resurrecting the old games on PC, modifying them to work on modern systems, which was invaluable. And then of course everybody else jumps on the bandwagon. Everybody wants their own marketplace. Epic Games, Ubisoft, all of these other companies. You know, their stores haven't really taken off quite the same way as Steam and GOG. Epic Games do try very hard. But yeah, you know, they try with this whole exclusivity thing, you know, fracturing the market again, because that's what everybody wants, right? That's what gamers want, is the marketplace to be fractured. You know, another way with which gamers have been treated like dirt is having the market shattered, just in the sense of buying a game that wasn't even made by a particular console company or whatever as an exclusive, you know. So that all happens, and what we're left with, you know, the PC market, no physical media now. It's extraordinarily rare that you will see physical media for PC games. What you might get is, if there is a special edition of a game that might have a statue, you get that, but the disc sometimes is missing. It's just a code, a download code, and that's it. And that's how it operated. That's how it operates now. And console games, they want the same thing with console games. So we were sold this idea that it would be cheaper. And the reason why it wasn't initially was because they said, well, the bricks and mortar stores, like Game in the UK, GameStop over in the US, weren't happy at the prospect of their games being undercut by digital distribution, which would go on and sell those games at a much lower price. They were worried that it would put them out of business. And because these places were selling the hardware and the software, back in that age, back in the mid 2000s, they had still quite a bit of leverage in order to be able to complain about that. But going forward into the modern age, that leverage has been eroded away. These stores are struggling to survive. They don't have the leverage that they once had. So have the price of games come down as we were promised? The answer to that is no. They've gone up. They've gone up totally against what we were told, what we were promised, when we were said, embrace digital distribution, it will save you money. No, it hasn't. Now, I don't include Game Pass, because that certainly doesn't save you money anymore. or whatever the Sony equivalent, PlayStation Plus, or whatever the hell that version of that is, which is the equivalent of Game Pass. I'm not including them because they are a rental service. That's like paying a subscription for a rental. That's not buying the game. But then there is a bit of the crux. Today, you aren't really buying the game. You're buying a rental. Even if you're paying full price for the game. Because these things can be just taken away from you. And there's nothing that you can do. There's nothing that you can do about it at all. Yes. It's up in the tree. And that's not what we were promised. That's not what we were told. That's not what we were promised. We were told that the cost of buying a game would come down with digital distribution. And game prices have gone up. And they've used exactly the same nonsense excuse as what they used back with CD-ROM. Cost of developing games has gone up. Well, whose fault's that? You know, if it's taking, as I've said in a previous video, if it's taking you over 5-6 years to make a video game, you're doing something extremely wrong. Your company is not running properly. Your development is not running properly. And it's as simple as that. You're not managing the project correctly. It should never take that long to make a video game. And a lot of them, it takes all this time. And they quote chapter and verse about how long it's taken and so on and so forth. But ultimately, what you see is the game ain't that great. The game is not that great. So, all that dev time, what was that spent on? The games are coming out, they're glitchy, they're not optimized very well for the systems that they're running on. Gamers once again are getting a raw deal. And gamers complain about it and then they get called all sorts under the sun. Toxic being one of the words which is used quite often, which I find quite annoying because are there some toxic gamers out there? Yes. Go into any hobby or any pastime, books, TV, movies, music. God, even if you went to some kind of, knitting or crocheting club, there'll be somebody in there who's a toxic member of that community, because that's not unique to any particular community. That's just a human trait. There are some people who look for fights, who are toxic, who are nasty, and that's just what it is. That's not symptomatic of gaming. That's symptomatic of being a human. But what they've started to do is they've started to tarnish anybody who complains. When game prices go up, we get tarnished and complained about. When games come out and they don't have features in that they should have, we get called toxic. And that's totally out of order. And that is something that has to stop now. Because what they're doing there is they're trying to control the narrative. They're trying to control the argument. They're trying to take away people's right to complain about something, They're taking that away with absolute impunity, just by simply saying, I think the game prices these days are too expensive, they need to come down. You get called being toxic, and so on and so forth. And it is completely out of order. It's wrong, it's out of order. And rightfully, people are pushing back against it. They're not. They're just getting fed up. I'm getting fed up. I'm getting fed up of waiting years for a game. And when it comes out, it's broken. It doesn't work. I'm getting fed up of game prices being inflated with absolutely ridiculous reasons given, and then being called entitled when we complain about it. Is there any industry in the world that actually has such an adversarial relationship with its customer? Hardware manufacturers, down the years, have attacked gamers. Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo have done it. The software publishers, hell, even the organisations, and I've covered this before, like magazine publications and mainstream video game media websites have done this. They've attacked the end user. It goes on and on and on. And I'm tired of it. I'm fed up of it. I am done with it. We pay a considerable amount of money for this stuff. We pay a large amount of money for stuff. And why should we just sit idly by while we're lied to? You've got games that come out promising all of these features. You see demos of games. I mean, the whole infamous bullshot stuff. Remember the bouncer for the PlayStation 2 being revealed at E3? And turns out it was a target render. It wasn't playable. It was a target render. Killzone 2 on the PS3. What we saw unveiled at E3 was a lie. Infamously, Aliens Colonial Marines looked nothing like what we were promised, despite the assurances that it would look like that. That was a lie. You've got a whole history and a catalogue of this, and it's wrong. And we shouldn't be putting up with it. We shouldn't be accepting it. And certainly we should not be being called all the names under the sun when we do that. These people need to remember who it is that puts the money in their pockets. It's the gamer. You know, who is it that goes onto these websites that generates ad revenue? It's the gamer. You know, who is it that endures all of this nonsense? It's the gamer. We do. Not them. We do. And I'm tired of it, essentially. We've had enough. I'm sick and tired of being called toxic just because I don't want to pay £80 for a game that's bug-ridden and then be asked to pay a further £70, £80 for undefined season passes and DLC. We're paying a lot of money. A lot of money. And we shouldn't feel bullied into silence. Not now, not ever. I'm done with it. I mean, just think to yourself, like, where else would customers be insulted, openly insulted? Where else would that occur and it be acceptable? The only place where it seems to be acceptable is with video games. And it's way out of order. And I've only really hit the tip of the iceberg with it, you know, in all honesty. It's just been the tip of the iceberg with it all. You know, you delve deeper, go further back, history is replete with it. You know, it's wrong. And I say, I did this video today a bit calmer. You know, I did try to be a little bit more balanced. I was kind of mad yesterday. I went on to Eurogamer to look for some news articles, and I've not been on there for a while. But I thought I'd have a look and have a look. I was confronted by a splash screen that popped up. Now I didn't have ad blocker switched on, it was on my phone. And the splash screen basically says, you either allow us to install tracking cookies and other kinds of unmeasurable things onto your computer, or you have to pay a subscription fee to access the website. Excuse me. What? So I thought, okay, is this just a glitch? So I tried it on my tablet and then my PC, and it was the same on all of them. So I was really hopping mad. It's another example of nonsense. I mean, to me, that should be illegal. We have the right to opt out of cookies being installed on our machines, tracking us. We have a right for that. But Eurogamer, because, you know, clearly it's not, you know, clearly it's a company that's rolling in money, it would seem, and can afford to alienate its customer base. Because of that, you know, they've decided that they're going to charge you just to go on their website, which is hilarious. So, needless to say, Eurogamer, my bookmarks to it have been deleted. I will never even click on that website again. So I've deleted the bookmarks, and that website is now gone, as far as I'm concerned, which it will, I would imagine, quite soon disappear from existence. I can't imagine there's anybody in their right mind who's going to enable tracking cookies to be installed upon their computer, or pay, you know, be held to ransom, really. I don't think there's too many people that will do that. Certainly not too many people. Yeah, so I was kind of a bit mad when I come out, and that sort of was reflective in the video. You know, I was on my soapbox, really, sort of like banging the drum. You know, how dare they think that they can get away with holding people to ransom like this? I really hate that kind of thing. So yeah, I was sort of wound up. So I'll come out with a bit more balance today to have a chat about it. And we had quite a discussion on it. You know, in conclusion, yes, I do think that we're treated badly. I do think gamers have been treated badly. I've not even scratched the surface. You know, I've not even talked about the outright lies that some game publishers and developers have told us down the years. The utter shocking lies where they've promised things that haven't been included in the release of their games, and it's been unapologetic. It's all right fixing it years later, but you lie to people in the first instance. You know, you've already had the money for the game, so, you know, it's out of order. But anyway, I think I'm done. I've rambled on for quite a long time today. I'm glad I did redo it. I think I've articulated it better. So yeah, I'll see you all in the next one, whenever that may be. Thank you for watching.